Hello Army! Welcome back to Zone Taekook channel. Something felt off in this moment when Jungkook quietly refused the drink from Taehyung. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it said so much. Fans immediately noticed the shift, the silence, the distance. Taehyung's expression changed in just a split second. Like he wasn't expecting that reaction at all. And Jungkook, he stayed quiet, avoiding eye contact, like something deeper was going on beneath the surface. Was it just a simple moment or something more that we didn't see? Because sometimes the smallest actions carry the heaviest emotions. And this one, it left everyone wondering. The moment didn't end when the drink was refused. It lingered, stretching far beyond those few seconds that fans kept replaying again and again. Something subtle had shifted, and even without words, it was impossible to ignore. Taehyung didn't react in a way most people would expect. There was no visible frustration, no exaggerated response. Instead, there was a quiet stillness, a pause that felt heavier than any reaction could have been. His expression softened, but not in a light way. It carried a hint of something unspoken, something that made the moment feel more personal than public. Jungkook, on the other hand, seemed to retreat inward. It wasn't just about turning away or staying silent. It was the kind of silence that creates distance even when two people are standing close. His body language shifted almost instinctively, like he was trying to avoid drawing attention. Yet that very action became the center of attention itself. Fans began noticing details they hadn't paid attention to before. The timing felt off. The interaction felt incomplete. It wasn't just a simple refusal, because simple moments don't leave this kind of lasting impression. There was a pause afterward that felt longer than it actually was, as if both of them were caught in a space where neither moved forward nor fully stepped away. What made it even more emotional was how natural everything looked on the surface. There were no obvious signs of conflict, no clear indication of tension, and yet the atmosphere felt different. It was the kind of difference that can't be explained easily, only felt. Taehyung's energy seemed to shift quietly after that. Not dramatically, but enough for attentive eyes to notice. The warmth that usually radiated so effortlessly from him appeared more contained, more careful. It wasn't gone, but it felt like it was being held back, as if something had interrupted its flow. Jungkook remained composed, but his composure felt deliberate. There was a sense that he was choosing how much to show, how much to hold in, and that choice made the moment even more intriguing. Because when someone as expressive as him becomes noticeably reserved, it raises more questions than answers. The distance between them wasn't physical. They were still in the same space, still part of the same moment. But something about the connection felt slightly out of sync, like two rhythms that didn't quite align for just a brief second. And sometimes that's all it takes for people to notice. What stayed with fans wasn't just the refusal itself, but everything surrounding it. The timing, the expressions, the silence, and the way it all unfolded so quickly, yet left such a lasting impact. It became one of those moments that feels small at first glance, but grows heavier the more you think about it. Because moments like this don't come with explanations. They leave space for interpretation, for curiosity, for emotion. And that space is exactly what keeps people watching, rewatching, and wondering if there was something more hidden beneath the surface. But in the end, nothing was confirmed. Nothing was explained. And maybe that's why this moment stayed with so many people, not because it gave answers, but because it didn't. The moment didn't fade the way most small interactions do. Instead, it followed them, quietly threading itself into everything that came after. What should have been just another passing second somehow stayed present, like an unfinished thought that refused to settle. Jungkook moved forward as expected, keeping his focus and maintaining the same calm composure people are used to seeing. But there was something slightly different in the way he carried himself. Not obvious, not something that could be pointed out immediately, but enough to make careful viewers pause and look again. His energy felt more controlled, almost like he was choosing every reaction more carefully than before. Taehyung remained just as composed on the outside, but there was a softness that lingered in his expression, something quieter than usual. It wasn't sadness in a clear, visible sense. It was more like a moment of reflection that hadn't fully passed yet. The kind of feeling that stays behind the eyes even when everything else seems normal. As time went on, nothing dramatic happened. No clear distance, no visible conflict. And yet, the absence of anything obvious only made the moment feel heavier. Because when nothing is explained, people begin to look closer. searching for meaning in every small detail. Fans revisited the scene, noticing how quickly everything shifted. The timing of the refusal, the slight hesitation, the almost imperceptible change in expression. It wasn't just about what happened but how it happened. The rhythm felt interrupted, like a conversation that stopped before it even began. There were subtle differences afterward. The way their interactions unfolded felt slightly more measured, more aware. Not distant, but not as effortless as before. It was as if both of them had stepped into a quieter space where everything was still normal, yet not entirely the same. Jungkook's silence became part of the story. Not a loud silence, but one that carried weight. It didn't push people away, but it didn't invite them in either. It simply existed, leaving room for interpretation. Taehyung's presence, on the other hand, felt steady but introspective. He didn't pull back, but there was a sense that he was holding something in, something that didn't need to be shown but could still be felt. What made everything more emotional was how normal it all looked to anyone not paying close attention. Nothing was clearly wrong. Nothing stood out in a way that demanded explanation. And yet, for those who noticed, the shift was undeniable. It became one of those moments that lives between certainty and doubt, too subtle to confirm anything, but too meaningful to ignore. And that uncertainty is what kept people watching, analyzing, trying to understand what couldn't be fully explained. Because sometimes the most impactful moments are the ones that don't reveal themselves completely. They stay unfinished, open-ended, leaving behind a feeling instead of an answer. And even as everything moved forward, as new moments replaced old ones, this one didn't disappear. It simply became quieter, more distant, but never fully gone. And as time continued to pass, the moment didn't grow weaker, it evolved. What once felt like a brief interaction slowly turned into something that lingered beneath the surface, quietly shaping how every new moment was perceived. It wasn't something obvious, not something that could be pointed out directly, but it was there, in the pauses, in the glances, in the subtle shifts that only became visible when people started looking closer. Jungkook maintained his steady composure, moving forward with the same calm precision. Nothing about his actions suggested hesitation, and yet, there was a sense that everything he did carried more intention than before. Every movement felt measured, every reaction carefully balanced, as if he was aware of something no one else could fully see. Taehyung, on the other hand, continued to radiate that quiet warmth he was known for. But now that warmth seemed layered with something deeper, something more thoughtful, more restrained. There were fleeting moments where his expression softened just a little too much, where his gaze lingered just a second longer than expected. Moments so brief they could easily be missed, but once noticed, they were impossible to forget. When they found themselves in the same space again, everything appeared normal. Their timing aligned, their presence felt familiar, and nothing outwardly suggested a change. But beneath that surface, there was a subtle awareness, a quiet understanding that didn't need to be spoken to exist. It wasn't distance. It wasn't tension. It was something in between. A space that hadn't been there before, yet now felt impossible to ignore. Fans continued to watch, not for something obvious but for something real. Something that could confirm what they felt without turning it into something it wasn't. But the more they searched, the more it became clear that this wasn't a moment that would ever offer clear answers. Because some moments aren't meant to be understood. They aren't meant to be explained or defined. They exist in the in-between, in the silence, in the hesitation, in the emotions that are felt but never fully shown. And maybe that's why this moment never truly ended. Not because of what happened, but because of everything that didn't. And even as everything continued to move forward, the feeling never fully settled. It didn't demand attention, it didn't interrupt anything. But it stayed, quietly existing in the background of every new interaction. What once seemed like a single moment had now become something more. Something that shaped the way people saw everything that came after. Jungkook remained steady, almost untouched by the weight of it all on the surface. His expression stayed controlled, his movements precise, his presence calm. But that calmness no longer felt effortless, it felt intentional. Like every reaction had been carefully chosen. Like every moment was being held within a balance that only he understood. Taehyung, meanwhile, carried on with the same quiet composure. His presence still warm, still familiar. But there were moments, small, nearly invisible moments, where that warmth seemed to pause just for a second. Where his expression softened into something deeper, something more introspective. Not enough to raise concern, but enough to leave an impression that lingered longer than expected. Their interactions continued, subtle and natural on the outside. They stood close when they needed to, moved in sync when the moment called for it. And yet, there was a difference, not in what they did but in how it felt. The ease that once defined their dynamic now carried a quiet awareness, like both of them were moving through the same space, but with something unspoken held gently between them. It wasn't something that could be proven, it wasn't something that could be confirmed, but it was something that could be felt. Fans began to notice how even the smallest details seemed to carry more weight than before. A glance that lasted a fraction longer. Pause that felt just slightly too quiet. A shift in timing that broke the rhythm, even if only for a second. None of it was enough to stand alone, but together, it painted a picture that felt impossible to ignore. And still, nothing was ever acknowledged. No explanation, no clarification, just silence. But it wasn't an empty silence. It was the kind of silence that holds meaning. The kind that leaves space for interpretation, for emotion, for questions that don't need answers to exist. Because sometimes the most powerful moments aren't the ones that are fully seen or clearly understood. They're the ones that remain incomplete, the ones that linger in the background, quietly shaping how everything else is felt. And this moment, no matter how much time passed, refused to fade into something ordinary. Instead, it stayed subtle, unresolved, and deeply felt, like a story that never needed an ending to leave an impact.